But like what I found with like a lot of like powerlifting coaches is that there's a lot of them that just get into this. And they're just like they don't really understand like how like what coaching is and like what it really does come down
Yeah.
to. Because I think a lot of people just think it just is like the programming and it's just the hey, here's your macros. But like that means do we have AI algorithms that can do that right now? Like coaching is much more like as I've gotten more experience with it, it's more about like behavior change and really just
Yes.
guiding your athletes. So like for example, like you or 2 weeks out or a week out basically from run nationals right now, and
Yep.
you're like, you have all these lifters doing like these big things, and it becomes more about like behaviors. Like you need to hit your RPE 8. You cannot go above an RPE 8 for blah 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 reason. I know that you are not used to this, but you have to do this, and it's like a lot of it comes down to like trust and instilling confidence in your athletes. And I think that like the best coaches are really able to like guide their athletes all the time while still allowing them to remain autonomous into some degree, especially if you like actually want to become an elite athlete, you have to be very autonomous and goal driven. So actually, this is good like segue like what for you like makes like the good powerlifting coach in your experience? So I know
Um,
you have like a mentorship, I believe, all about this.
yeah, so like I think there's a lot of aspects of it. Um, Truth be told, when I got into it, it was more of like I really enjoy being in someone's corner and supporting them. And you're learning a lot of like the DUP mindset back when I first started, Mike Zordos, right? Because he was my mentor when I first came on board. Mike and I have a long-standing relationship, and then I met Matt Gary, uh, in SSPT at Rockville, and then kind of went, obviously did a lot of mentoring and indirect mentoring under him and Susie, and then I kind of grew from there, and it was organic over the time. But the main thing that I saw was that there was a need for communication and like being a support system for these athletes, um, as well as my hunger for movement issues because of all of like the injuries and things that I had dealt with. I was really under the PT or the movement side, biomechanics side of things. Because I've done the PRI course, I've done FRC, all of that stuff, clinical athlete, done them all. And really what it boils down to, it in terms of coaching is more about the programming and how to communicate and I bundle that under how to communicate through whether that's motivation, it's educational talks about how you're going to progress the block or how you're going to handle the block, as well as the mentality side of things, and how you coach cueing and movement and things like that, and have being able to deal with roadblocks and obstacles and troubleshooting, right? And that's kind of what it boiled down to for me. In the recent years is prioritizing those three main aspects would be communication, programming, and I would say movement. Um, Movement tied with like injury management, because I feel like at any one point I deal with multiple injuries as a coach, and being able to stem the tide for that and being able to have a path forward. Obviously, we have a ton more resources in that aspect with guys like Derek, John Song, Mike Taylor. There's a lot of people that are in the PT realm that are super supportive. And, I kind of have a general rule of thumb, like if I can't figure it out in a week or two, we don't see any progress, I'm outsourcing. And then, from there, it's pure collaboration. But I think overall, to circle back to your question, is that being a support system on different, facets of the game is what a good coach should be. Um, and being able to understand your athlete as who they are, what their ticks are, all that kind of stuff, to be able to put together the program. Because Steven mentioned this to me a while back on when we were discussing something, and basically, coaching someone from a programming side of things is not necessarily about, oh, it needs this like specific like structure, top set, another top set, and then back downs kind of situation. You're actually playing into the psychology of the lifter as well.
Right.
And you are trying to unlock their potential. And that is so deep sometimes that um you figure it out through mistakes, you figure it out through good, good times and bad, to be able to understand what it is. Like, I can think of a specific lifter where, basically, like, she'll ask me like, hey, what should I take for my top set? And we, kind of have that rapport of being able to kind of how we see the block progression. And a lot of times I'll watch her last warm up, and I always take the 2.5 under, because I know if I push her too hard, she'll go over the, like, it's over the edge. And there's a sense of comfort with that as well, that we've determined that allows her to feel like she can put that effort and that confidence into that lift, because I don't want to put her outside of this comfort zone that she has, because it will push her to the edge, and then ultimately we miss. Even though speed wise, you'd be like, wow, it's definitely there. I've made that mistake more times than not in training. I'll be like, I'll take the bigger number. Like, I want to see the big number go down. Nope, that was the wrong call. Like, right. And we have to understand, who they are, and you're doing so much reflection and introspect, thinking on them and how they approach things, that we can, start to decipher what they need.
I think that's really valuable with like the whole psychology aspect of things. Is like, actually one of my observations as a coach has been like, it really is like, in terms of determining optimal training response, I really go along with like, what does the athlete like to do? In the sense of like, some people really like higher intensities, other people like doing a little bit more volume. Other people have more of a bodybuilding background, so like, more of a general, minimal approach on SBD, and letting them push their accessories can be really, really helpful. Because like for myself, like, I come from a bodybuilding background, and I work with Eric Boswell, and a lot of my training coach, it's mostly bodybuilding. I do a lot of higher rep stuff. I like, having that one heavier set. Like, I don't really like, I'm not the type of person like anymore where I'm like, oh yeah, I really want to like an RP like 9 or something like that, because I know I feel pretty bad after that. Whereas like one of my other lifters, Trevor, he was having a lot of issues with, making progress, kind of feeling a little bit beat up, whatever. And he has a background of actually doing conjugate. And so really, really going heavy max effort days and like maxing out very regularly. So, we weren't seeing very much progress. And I was like, okay, well, you like going heavy. Let's sort of the system that's going to allow you to, get in sufficient work while getting in, those heavier sets, and get him like a top single, for example, on like his primary day with like minus 25%, like a 6x3. Because Trevor also likes doing a lot of work, but he doesn't like doing it very, very hard. But like, literally in this block, it's been 4 weeks, and he's peaked like every session. Like, he's like, he squat like 584 at like 9, and like bench like 352 at 8, and deadlifted like 644 like on a stiff bar, which he's never done before. He's only done like a deadlift bar. And yeah, it's just always interesting to me, because I do think that, you mentioned like, we always want to like find out like, what is the meta, like what's the approach, and it's just like, it really just depends. It changes like month to month. And because I was having a conversation with like Eric about like my meet prep. He's like, we're doing singles right now. So I'm like, I kind of wanted to do them. He's like, well, maybe we should, keep a single in on deadlift going into your meet, but knowing you and your leverages, like, I don't think a single going into your meet on squat and bench is going to really be that productive. It can even lead to some regression. So I know that was a little bit of like a monologue, but I think that, coach centered, like, it has to be like client centered around, and like the whole movement aspect of things is also huge too. Is like, I come from an athletic training background, like that was what I was doing in grad school, and yeah, like, having that background, like a lot of people come to me for like cueing, and like that's what most of my content is on Instagram. So yeah, we can really talk about this forever, because like there's so many like nuances that come into it, but like the ultimate thing is like, the most sought out powerlifting coaches have experience coaching all types of athletes, and that's why like you are so invaluable, and like why people like Steve and Sean, Marcellus, you guys have years in the trenches working with really, really strong people. Was unfortunately, science is great, but there's so many limitations with what we are doing.
Yeah, I mean, like, in terms of that, like, we and again, piggyback off of what Steve and I have chatted about in the past, like, one thing that I've really done, because I truth be told, like a few years, I'd say about 2 years ago, I was like, man, I feel like I spent so much time in this like biomechanic side of things that like I need to like look at the programming more and more and more. And like, I've gone, yeah, I eat that stuff up. And I really like look at it, and you can see it as well, where you can start to put the pieces together between the two, right? Watching someone move, and then how the way they move, you can then implicate things of like, from a programming structure that that doesn't work. And that's definitely I'll give all the credit to Steve for kind of pointing that out, is that, and I know for a fact that he like looks at lifters and then he kind of thinks about who resembles them. And then from there, he kind of already knows, he can pull some information about the lifter that resembles them, or about the lift for that matter. If I've taken it to that far, and being able to put together the best structure, or at least give you the, narrow the target down. And then from there, it's just fine tuning. Because ultimately, I ask the question more often than not is, how do you feel? Right? How did this session feel? Right? Was it recovered and strong? Was it recovered and not strong? Like all of that information, that those little tidbits can give you the information on what that lifter needs. And then you're looking at aspects of progression models across the block. You're looking at, what is some gapping between top sets from a secondary day to a primary day, right? Then you're looking at frequency. Is a third squat day necessary for somebody to get there? Well, if it's an efficient lift, for that lifter, then yeah, probably. Like I have Bork on 3 days a week, right? Because and then even then he has top sets on each day, because I need him to get to that like intensity. You know what I mean? So he has like he'll have SSB, and then he'll have a comp squat, and then he has his primary day at the end of the week, and that's what we've determined that works really well for him, because he can sustain that volume, because it's a highly efficient lift. I can't give that to Marcellus. I can't give him that much like volume and be able to carry some of that intensity. We still have 3 squat days for Marcellus, but it's spaced out in a way, because he does then we have some belt squats and things like that for him to be able to kind of supplement things, because I can't get him too beat up, right? Then you're looking at week progressions. How many weeks can they train, right? 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 3 weeks, right? And then I'm looking at like just built. How are you built? Guys like Marcellus, like Charlie, they're on 3-week waves for me. That's it. 3-week waves. And even then I'll take a whole wave where I'm keeping it a little bit more conservative, because the way they move, the way they carry themselves, like I can't do 4-week rotations and expect them to make the progressions and the jumps that they need to make. Right? They're going to need bigger jumps week to week, because you get a pretty much one solid week out of them before, things start to go backwards. Right. And that's just trial and error, and being able to understand trends between, how somebody's, physically built, how they move. And then you go into the psyche aspect of it. Like, do they need more conservative approach and volume because that makes them feel more comfortable, or can they handle a lot more top sets and higher exposures in that regard? So there's just so many avenues that you can go, but your data as a coach is the biggest piece to being able to solve that, and being able to step back and think about the lifter from different aspects of whether it's a movement or a psychological, and what is their tried and true. I always ask that, what is your tried and true? Because like you just mentioned with your athlete, you're like, okay, well, this didn't work. I'm just going to go back to this and see what happens. Right. And that works a lot of times. It might need tweaks. Then you can get into the idea of progressions and, hey, do you need a top single on this like tertiary bench day to carry you into the primary day? I don't know. Right. But you start to go through some of the feedback with them, and then that's where it starts to evolve. Right. And then you get a microcycle and a macrocycle that work perfectly, and you just rinse and repeat until something doesn't work, or you tweak it constantly.
Yeah.
So there's a lot.
Mike Couillard, Mike Couillard, like, and I like had a conversation about this, but like, we basically like both said, like whatever your coaching system is, like, it's okay to have a bias. Like, I definitely have a little bit more bias because of my athletic training background, and really I'm thinking, how can I get this person? I would rather have slow progression without rate of injury, and then like a really massive progression, and somebody gets hurt. But like so that's why I go more towards like probably a little bit more of a conservative volume approach on the SBD, and sure. Something like that, and pushing like saturations more often. But like a training system, you as a coach, ultimately your job is to get the athlete to progress. And your training system, wherever that is, should still be able to find whatever approach it is. Like, I never thought this would work, but it's working. That's really what another thing that you have to really ask. Because I do think that is what with most beginner coaches, they're like, well, this should work. Well, it's not working. Well, it has to be something wrong with the athlete. It's like, no, that's a hole in your system. You have to take ownership over that.
Not even a hole, but like you don't have the tool to troubleshoot. Right. Like I have a lifter, it's not a client of mine. There's a guy in the gym talks to me. He's asking me about like different programs that he's running, for like free programs, Steve's, Candido's, all that. And I was like, look, they're great. You as a person though, are going to likely have to troubleshoot at the end of them to understand what it is that you could potentially tweak to get it to go in the right direction. If something's lacking or what have you. And that, I don't know if that's a specific lift or all three, whatever, but being able to have the tools to be able to assess what it is. Because in my opinion, I can look at any program and then be able to break down why something didn't work and why something did work and start to piece together the possible overlap on those two scenarios, or did the whole thing not work? What's going on? Because a lot of times the lifts like to do this, right? All three like to kind of dance around about which one goes up, which one goes down. And then as coaches, we're managing the rate of progression, right? I'll do this because it's a week out from nationals and I don't when this is getting posted, but Dallas is I have him forecasted right now in third. And you'd be like, okay, well, he had a 722 kilo total going into nationals, 722 and a half. He's going to be at 770. Give or take. And the thing about that is that we were 12 weeks out, right? And we were kind of just doing our steady rate and it was going great. It was fine. All of a sudden he like messages me and gives me this feedback and he says, hey man, I feel like I'm being held back. And I'm like, shit, I'm like, all right, what's going on? So we look at it and he's taking these numbers at like, instead of being 8s, they're at like 6s at the end of a block. I was like, all right, cool. And I was like, all right, I'll get a little bit more aggressive with you. I can't send it all to you because I know that you're not going to be able to handle it. Like you're going to run into walls constantly. And we had to really kind of like make 10, 15 kilo jumps from like week 4 numbers to the next week 4 and to be able to manage him so he didn't get beat up. And now he's starting to feel some fatigue. And I told him, I'm like, look, this doesn't surprise me. Like your rate of progression has been massive. And I didn't have 4 or 5 blocks to really kind of like nurture it, because that's what I don't need somebody jumping 10 kilos each block and expect for them to hang on. You know what I mean? They're going to hit a wall at some point. Joints, tendons, ligaments, whatever, are going to say, I'm done. Good luck. Or the fatigue aspect, which is the thing that we're dealing with. The fatigue is coming up a little bit faster. It's at bay, but it's not like full blown, and it's something we're managing now. And I knew it was coming. So we braced for it. We planned for it. And he's going to go into week 4 and, at nationals and ideally hit right around that 765, 770 range and try to lock up 3rd place going into prime time. So, I mean, but that's it. That's it right there, is that like these lifts are doing different things, but you want to try to hold on to them, or maybe, make sure that they continue or hold their progression or even flatline, but don't regress, while also trying to play the game of getting the other 2 to come up or down, whatever the situation is. But controlling the rate of progression, utilizing what works well, and understanding what doesn't work well, to be able to create these microcycles that then can be progressed across the macro cycle and put together with how someone's going to approach the block, right? And being able to know when someone's going to push hard and not push hard. It's just, there's, like you said, there's just so many avenues and so many nuances for each lifter that we have to sit there and spend that time to be able to diagnose. And like I said, having a system to be able to sit down and approach and be able to see it through that lens is absolutely critical to be, a good coach, in my opinion, especially from the programming side of things. Like you can be a great person, you can be awesome. And I feel like I've had instances where I've shown nothing but support and, communication and all that, but didn't have the tools.
Right.
I've had it. You're going to run into people like that every once in a while that throw your system for a loop. And honestly, I'm grateful for that, because that's what pushes me to go and figure out answers. I'll get answers 6 months down the line. I've had lifters leave and go to other coaches, and I'll straight up, congratulate them, support them, because I wasn't the right person for the job. They were, and and now I'm asking questions like, what was it that you guys did? Like, this is awesome. And I get a little bit of feedback. Obviously, I'm not getting the exact, breakdown, but that helps me learn, right? Or I'm going to go and dig for more information that helps me answer the question. Like, you have to be willing to just hustle and try to improve every day. Especially for your athletes. Like, there is a sense, if I ever get a sense of complacency, it freaks me out.
Yeah,
like,
yeah, no.
I'll go to write a block and I'm like, oh shit, like, what have I learned differently that I could help, like, better my athletes? Am I not doing enough? Like, oh dude, it's a little bit of imposter syndrome, but I use it as to my advantage, essentially. So
Right. No, I really wish, actually, no, I've been thinking about this more often. Like, I know that, like, there's a reason why lifters don't like sharing their training approaches. I really wish that we had a resource where we could actually look at, like, what are the best people doing, like, right now, and like just kind of comparing like what it looks like for different lifters, and like say, oh, this lifter responds better to higher intensity. This is like what in general, like what his program look. What are some similarities between that? What are lifters with certain levers on different lists? What are they usually responding well to? Like stuff like that. Because like, as coaches, that's why this is why those experience things like I think matters the most, because then you have that database that you can pull from. Oh, this is what I have. I feel like as a powerlifting coach community, and if we really wanted to like really just make the sport better and just getting more strong athletes, like that would kind of be awesome to have. Like I've shared my training like as it's changed over time, like on my
yeah.
on my YouTube channel. And it's just like I don't really care. I really want to put that out there. But at the same time, I can also understand why they don't do that, because like, just ultimately this is how you and I provide for ourselves. And it can be sometimes it can be kind of
Yeah.
like it can be kind of like, it's like, oh well, I don't necessarily want to give out all my secrets, quote unquote, because like that's what you hire me for. But maybe like I don't know, it's just like, what do you think about that? Is like
Oh,
I
you
think
mean
there's
like
like two sides of
gatekeeping?
it. Like yeah,
Like
like
gatekeeping?
exactly. It's like it's like in my opinion, like I don't really care. I'm like literally like people at my gym are like they'll ask like, what are you doing? What is this Lefter doing? What's like Austin doing? What's Trevor doing? What's Wawa doing? I'm like, like
I mean,
Trevor's weird, like like
so now we're getting into the realm of like, social media. I mean, if we're giving out trade secrets, we're doing it at the ability to push. Like, there's education, and there's obviously pushing our like, our image as a coach and stuff like that out there. So, I mean, education to me is like, you're not going to scare me to like hand my program over to somebody, just flat out. And I think that's really important. Like, that's what Steve and Marcellus and Matt Cronin and Sean are doing with powerlifting now. They're putting out such good information that, like, if you're not utilizing that, you are like sadly mistaken on what you think coaching should be. Because at the end of the day, like, obviously there's like anecdotal information of how like somebody approaches things. Like Steve's fatigue signals have taken a good hold on things. Marcellus's approach to jumps and progressions across blocks. Noriega's series on how to build out a macro cycle. Like, all of that information is so valuable. The thing that I'll say to this is that no one should be scared of putting their information out there, is that you're not like that. Your trade secrets aren't that like secretive. Like, someone's not going to take their program that they give and like, oh, that's what you're doing, and like hand it off to somebody else and like, oh, now everybody's doing great. No, you're playing the lifter
right.
every single day. It is a game. And to have all the tools in the tool belt is absolutely critical to play the game correctly. And being able to troubleshoot the things that you need to troubleshoot. Like, powerlifting now, YouTube, everything that's being put out there is absolutely imperative. So like, I don't think gatekeeping your information is doing you any and doing a coach any benefit by that regard. It comes with the benefit of two things. One, you are providing information out there, and two, it's content, which is only benefiting your image as a coach, right? And putting your name higher and higher on the list, especially if that information is let's say more like unique, right? Not like regurgitation. Obviously, some regurgitated content, maybe with a twist here and there, is fine. But like, or just something that you like you figured out with your own clients, like go spread that information. I know I'm looking like egg on my face here, the guy that doesn't really post a whole lot, but it is valuable to the community to be able to pick up the little bit of information, right? Even if it's just a tidbit on, my bench neck pressure thing, right? And I even have another add-on to that because I go deeper and deeper with stuff and figure out things a little bit more and more based on my conversations with guys like Noriega, John Song, Steve, Marcellus, Joe, all of them, right? And you're actually, I would say you're hurting yourself to not put it out there. And you look, what you wrote a year ago, probably different than what you write now.
Yep.
At least for me, shit, 6 months ago was probably different than what I wrote. Like, because at the end of the day, I'm only focused on the lifter in front of me. That's it. Whenever I'm writing a program, that's who I'm addressing. That's where our communication goes a long way. That's where the feedback, the analysis of blocks, all of that is where I'm dumping this mass amount of information that I've accumulated, and I'm dumping it in there and trying to figure out what works best for them. Right. And I'm sorry, but like our blocks aren't that special. They're like, they're special to that one individual, not to other people. So it's actually doing a disservice if you're going to go and copy someone else's program and think that it's going to work well. You're doing your disservice. Look, tons of free programs out there. And Steve's, Candido's, the endless amounts of them have amazing qualities to get that person in the door. And then from there, it's still going to have to deal with how do you approach your training? What is your, is it mentality? Is it ego? How does it respond? Like, how do you respond to squat being on a Monday and then on a Friday, or Monday, then a Thursday? Like, is it 72 hours? Is it 96? Do you need a third day to like bridge that 96-hour gap? I don't know. You're not going to know until you try, but you're not going to pick it up by stealing your buddy's program, borrowing your, like, just not.
Well, that's why, like, a lot of times I think a lot of people, they basically doubt like what the value of like a good coach is, or what value is. Because like a lot of people, they haven't really. I think a lot of times I think people have poor money mindsets in general. Like they're like, oh, I don't want to give out the money that's
Sure.
coach is asking for. Like I sympathize with that. The reality is that if you want to make the best progress, you need to look at what all the best athletes are doing too. Every single best athlete has as a coach. If you go into school, say you want to get a really good job, you want to go to the best school you possibly can to get the best education. It's no different than with coaching. And so investing in yourself, and like what you said, like having that person there that's objective. Like I think the main thing is like, I just want to be an athlete. This is my full-time job. This is your full-time job. But hey, I'm not my own coach, because I understand that I'm emotional about my own training. I'm going to make poor decisions. And guess what? I'm definitely not going to get myself 9s on sleepy bar squat, but Eric Bodhorn is. And guess what? I'm going to them if they make me better. And also, it's more layers of accountability, because like if I was left to my own devices, I'm pretty stupid. I'm just going to go RPE 9 all the time, because I kind of like lifting heavy. I kind of like suffering a little bit, but that's not going to make me progress. So when I get my block from Eric, I'm like, okay, I'm paying him per month. Well, you better believe I'm hitting RPE 6 the best of my ability. You better believe I'm going to hit that volume. You better believe when he weighs my volume down, I'm going to listen. And this is a good segue into like a little bit like the managing fatigue, like when intensity gets like a little bit higher in a training block. Because I'm one of those lifters, I really respond poorly with like from a fatigue standpoint. Like once I get like above like in 8 or 2 in 8 on like squat and deadlift. And like one of the things like we've done is like different to like the typical wave load approach. Like I don't, and I've started doing this with some of my own lifters. So I've noticed the same, tendencies where they get really beat up from higher intensities. Is I have a 4-week wave, but my week 4 is a volume deload. So like we'll do like one less set on everything, and then on my primary, and then on week 1, that's my intensity reduction. So I'm kind of getting like 2 deload weeks, which is kind of like what I need anyways. Because I think sometimes, like I think that's the main difference. Is some people, when they touch those higher intensities, they need just like 2 weeks of just like some like a little bit less. Whereas some lifters, like they just need 1 and they're fine. And I found this has a lot to do with just with like strength levels and range of motion. Like I'm not a well leveraged power lifter at all.
Yeah.
Like even deadlift, like it's like I have good leverages, quote unquote, but like I have a small range of motion. I can do conventional. So
I mean, it makes a ton of sense, right? Because you are figuring out what it is that, like, if you're going to go up and fundamentally, like, intensity goes up, loading, volume goes down. So it makes perfect sense. And it also gives you a little bit more time to recover between sessions, right? As you get into those higher intensities throughout the week. And on week 4, then ultimately week 1, you're dropping your intensity off and then being able to kind of re-ramp things. So it's almost like you're doing like a 3.5 kind of situation, where it's like you're playing a little bit into the variables. And I do the same thing. Like I've seen, with Bork's pressing, right? Bench pressing, can bench really well, but the way he benches, he can't tolerate a lot of pressing volume, especially towards the end of the block, where he's pushing hard on these top sets, and which gives him the response we want. But if he comes out of there and he's too fatigued, well, I can't do that. Like I can't tolerate that. Or being able to understand how somebody progresses, and maybe just capping the back down loads to like a set progression. So let's say you're taking week 1 at 150 kilos, 160 kilos on week 2, 170 on week 3, and like 185 on week 4, right? We take the big jump into week 4, right? But think about if you're still doing a standard percentage back down, that changes across the block, right? Your 10 kilo jumps is making possibly those back downs too big of a jump from week to week. So like being able to have load caps on something like that, where I'll write in, instead of saying like week 1 might be a 10% drop, but week 2 might be plus 5 kilos or plus 2 kilos, right? From previous week, or plus 5. Like I'm going to cap that out, because I don't need everything all blowing up at the same time, because then I'm going to hit a fatigue wall so freaking bad and have to deal with it for the possibly 2, maybe 3 weeks, heck, a whole block sometimes. It's just sometimes having those like capped progressions on the back downs can stave that off a little bit, so that you can still push the top sets and get the adaptations, and get to where you need to get to, right? And then the idea of priming effect and being able to carry an adaptation into the primary day, I think is also like super critical. This is trying to think of so the one thing I do with like a lot of blocks when I'm like researching them is, what is the like leading up to the primary day, what is preceding that from that lift? Like let's say it's a squat, right? Let's say somebody's squatting on a Monday and a Thursday. I'm looking at the top sets on Monday into Thursday, because a lot of times the Thursday primary session is taking some sizable jumps. Maybe it's 10 kilos, maybe 12, 15, maybe by the end of the block. Well, is my secondary day taking the same approach? Right. And if it is, maybe I don't need them to be at an 8 or 9 RPE or something like that by the end of the week, or at the end of the block for that secondary day. But how can I still keep my gap the same or close to it? Right. Like like if I'm squatting 200 kilos, can I take a top set of 100 kilos on day 1 and expect to be able to handle 200 kilos on week, day 4, day 5, whatever? Probably not. Right. I'm going to need to bridge that and make sure that I have enough intensity to carry me there, right? Have that adaptation to carry me there, right? And that skill set. So like there's so many different, like I said, there's so many different things that we have to deal with as coaches, being able to address, someone's training.
I like what you said about the controlling like the downset progression, because like what I personally do is like I tell my lifters, like I do use the concept like training max, like 95% of like your peak. And I usually tell them like I want you to keep that on like your secondary days and like whatever on like a down set. If I said, at 6, I'm saying like on like a down set or something like that, I want you to use like your training master or whatever. Whereas on your top sets, like let's auto regulate that based off of like how you are progressing. Because if you think about it, like Sean he was on his podcast talking about this. But it's like, you can still get pretty strong, like with like 95%, probably a little bit better for fatigue, and hopefully your top set is going up and it's outpacing that progression. But like managing that, especially like going with like just like managing injury, like total workload, like if you're going up by like that much on all of your down sets and in addition to your top set, like that's a pretty big spike. But it's also interesting because you were talking about like the priming effect, and like I definitely noticed like in general, like if the more intensity lifter can handle, because we know that intensity is the primary driver of strength, they're probably going to get stronger. This is one of the reasons why I think John Hack is like untouchable right now, because he just handles like that 9 to 10 like really, 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 really well, like across the week. But not every lifter's like that. And so kind of finding out like how heavy can I actually push this person? Like, can this person actually tolerate like 2 singles per week? Can this person tolerate, 2 higher intensity sets, or are they somebody where like they only need like 1? Like it really just depends on the person. And like sometimes like I think it also has to do with like, so I'm personally somebody that get pretty like beat up on like my secondary days, like and like I like the squat and the deadlift, like I'll be like easily like 10%, 5, 10% weaker across the board on that.
Yeah.
Like, and that's why I don't push intensity very hard. It's like I'm not going to really benefit from it, because if you think about it, you're really only training strength when you are around like that peak to some extent. Everything else is trying to bridge, like you said, the most efficient way for me to bridge is to keep my intensity lower on those days.
Yeah, and being able to like control that, like that's, and even then, like I thought back too, because this is the coach mindset that just never leaves. Like I look at I saw Demetria Thatton just posted her like top set like squat, and Steve posted it, and yeah, she took 2.5 kilos. I think it was 2.5 kilos above her last, like the Arnold prep, if I remember correctly. It's 2.5 kilos more on the same time frame, right? Because they're likely keeping this almost the exact same structure going into it, and it moved faster and it was heavier. But like it's 2.5 kilos. Now at her strength level, that's perfect. Like that's exactly what you need to set yourself up, and that's their rhythm going into it. But like we think about this too, like you don't necessarily need to hit the home runs all the time. Your home runs are at meets, or when you're trying to really hit something specific and you put that emphasis into it. But back down work and things like that, you're just looking for those incremental wins all the time to stack it up. You don't want losses in your training, right? You're not like trying to go backwards here. You're trying to always go forward. And even your volume and stuff like that, like even if I do a 5 kilo jump each week, let's say my top sets increase by 2.5 kilos. Well, in turn, my back downs are going to do the same. And if I'm adding 5 kilos a week or whatever for a squat back down, like I'm gaining over time. Right. And it's little like I get social media very much drives the idea of, oh, big PR, big PR, big PR. Oh man, I'm not making that much progress. Like if you're doing it the right way, you're making progress all the time. It's just not necessarily going to show up, every time you want to post something to social media, or like you want that gratification, like that instant gratification. Like you're gaining over time, especially if you're having, somebody track it, or if you're tracking it for yourself, like that growth over time, volume PRs, all that kind of stuff can be your wins while things may slow down, right? Because rate of progression is not like this. It's likely going to be a little bit up and down, maybe flat line, but like if you have other variables that are working on that slow progression, those are your wins that you can kind of live off of while things kind of, maybe flatline. And that aligns with, stuff I see with athletes where their motivation kind of falls off. Okay, cool. Like, all right, your top sets stay the same, but like, maybe I'm going in and kind of tweaking the back downs just a little bit higher, right? And still just overall trying to drive the progression, even though they might not be on that like peak performance mindset, because, now we're talking about the mentals and the psychology of a lifter going up and down until like prep shows up, then they feel like they've signed up, and that really puts the pedal down for them, and things start to, they get better at their variables outside the gym and all that kind of stuff, right? Because I mean, we're beating it to a dead horse at this point, but basically saying there's just so many variables that go into someone's training to be able to create the progress that we want them to create. And then ultimately aligning with their goals and their motivations and being able to match that and put it on paper and get them to where they want to get to.
I think that really, you said right there, like, that's like why you need a coach. Like, that's truly
Yeah.
why, because you're going to miss those things on your own.
Oh,
No matter how introspective you are going to miss things, and having somebody to just talk to, saying, this is how I'm feeling, blah, blah, I'm feeling like pretty beat up, blah, blah, blah. And like, well, as a coach, I'm going to say, like, my system is personally, I'm always going to say, oh, you're feeling beat up. Okay, cool. What are your calories at? How much sleep are you getting per night? What's your body weight doing? How is, life stress, like whatever is going on? And if those things are not in play, I'm going to say, okay, you're only getting 6 hours of sleep at night, and you're in a calorie deficit. Okay, that is probably why. It's probably not the program. We probably shouldn't change anything. Let's get that down and locked. Once everything is on point, then I'm going to say, okay, or if you just determine, okay, oh, this is just the constraints of their job or their lifestyle. I'll look otherwise at the program and say, okay, cool, based off of this and whatever, like, you're not going, this is what we should probably do. And then I will look towards the program and have a system of like, okay, do we need more volume, more intensity? Do we need, more, but do we need to mess with specificity or drive variations? Like, one of the things actually with like cueing is like, I found there are very, very, very few people that respond very well to like external cueing, especially in an online format. I can give external cues in an in-person setting. It works pretty well. But like, I really do use variations to really drive that home for a lot of lifters. Like, I'll try cueing and I'm like, they're not really making improvements. I'm like, okay, I just need to give this guy a lot of different variations, just really get him like, to know. And that's actually one of the things I do with beginners. I think I do two things differently with beginners. I think most powerlifting coaches do. I give them a lot of singles because I think it's really important for them to really get those neurological adaptations. I think you also can keep like a single at 8, and they're probably going to make linear progress because they're just not that strong yet. They're so new. And then I will give them a ton of variations, like pause squat single, 3 count center squat, pin squat single, like pause deadlift single, like whatever, because I'm really trying to get them a ton of different strategies with saying, this is how you can move. And I think a lot of times, like the comp bench, for someone that doesn't know how to bench, they're a beginner, they're not going to know how to coordinate that. So you have to give them like a 3 count to like know how to give them, like detention set up on the back of their neck, like stuff like that. And I think that like that's how I fix technique as an online coach. And really just trying to just say like, this is a slow process, and also telling them your technique is going to slightly change every single session. Every single session is going to slightly change. That's why technique is a range. And what I'm mostly looking for is 2 things. Are they able to make consistent progress with that and not get hurt? Because if it looks weird as hell, but it works for them and they're making good progress, I'm like, well, let's keep doing it, unless it's like very, very obvious. Like there's like really like there's low lumbar rounding and they're deadlift. I'm gonna say, well, this probably isn't going to work in the long run. But that's sort of like what I personally like look at. And also just ask them like, what feels good? The athlete's like, this feels really strong.
Correct. Yep.
And
Big fan of that.
You're right. That's what you should do. Like for me, like you could look at my arm and say, no, your pinky shouldn't be on the ring. I'm like, oh no, it's on the ring. Like, because if I go a lot wider, that degree of internal rotation of the shoulder messes with my shoulder and my pec too much.
Sure. Yeah. So like, I mean, with movement stuff, like obviously I've gone down through quite a few rabbit holes with it. The stuff that Steve and I put out with the whole like center of mass concept and all of that is really what it boils down to. And I've spent, like I said, I've spent 9 years now, almost 10. Actually 10 years basically chasing this. And basically like we talked about is like, what is the good technique? And obviously there's that video on YouTube for it, but center of mass is ultimately what you're playing with. And the powerlifting now video I did for that is like, for squat and deadlift, it's center of mass. It's a center of mass game. If you can correct the center of mass, you can do whatever you want. And for me, it's also constraints, like you said, like using variations to help drive that home, is creating a constraint to force them to do what you want them to do. Because you don't really need them. So powerlifting should be 99% set up and like literally 1% execution. there should be no mental effort or very little mental effort to be able to execute a lift. Like you should be in a zone and have a flow state to be able to create that. Because then you're going to deal with the things that you just talked about, the inconsistency from session to session, variability, right? So variability and having, you know, a newbie take a lot of singles are all driving this idea of getting them more skill set in general with a variety of with the spectrum of intensity, right? And that's a great way to help them learn fast. And obviously, as they get stronger and they get heavier, now you come into potentially psychological issues on top sets where they get a little like overzealous, so they do something too much. And we deal with that. We deal with that at all levels of the game, every single level of the game. I deal with it. And like ultimately looking at, you know, getting them into that 99%, like that position of setup that allows them to execute and be efficient for them. And also just minimal margin of error, right? You're trying to reduce their ability to not screw this up. That's essentially it. Like let's say I have a lifter that, you know, loses their neck pressure in a bench press. They tend to slide, what have you. Okay, fine. Well, maybe I'm going to cue them to push a little bit harder into the bar when they're setting their pressure, right? Because to me, neck pressure is an equation. It's an equation of hand pressure up to push your neck down before you slide, and then there's the arch pressure from the legs.
Yes.
And those two together maximize how much neck pressure you maintain. Okay. And so if they only get half that equation, then I can get a little bit more by just telling them to kind of press into the bar a little bit before they slide. Well, that might give them the extra 2.5 on the platform I need in 6 weeks. I don't know, whatever. Or if they're over cueing things, right? Like they over cue retraction in the bench press setup, and they're bringing the bar down to the chest as opposed to shoving the chest up to the bar. Right. And like I said in my powerlifting video, it's bench press is a rib cage game. Shove your rib cage up as high as you possibly can. Don't worry about the bar. Bring your ribs up as high as you can in the best way that you can, and you will have minimal issues. At least in my opinion.
No, right? I fully agree with that, because like with bench press, like one of my clients, Austin, like I told him like you know, he's like overly retracting his like shoulders. And I realized that he's constantly just flow a eccentric, like tuck really hard, and then a second rep is like way better. I'm like, oh, this is like a retraction thing. I'm like, just think about having your chest high and let your shoulders do their thing. Just lay down with your elbows to your chest and trust yourself, and like voila, PR.
Yeah, I mean, and what you're like, yeah, exactly. Because now you're jointed, right? Him trying to like retract hard is like, you can see with my shoulder, it goes up to my ear when I retract. So why would I want that? Like retraction is actually going to compress the ribs, right? If I try to retract, like where does my rib cage go? It goes down.
You also can't breathe deep into like your rib cage. Those intercostals are contracted.
I can't shove the rib cage up the bar. I can't do it. So, not to mention, think about the scapula, right? The scapula retracts and elevates. Well, I had all that neck pressure. Where did that go? That's gone, right? Because now my scapulas are in the way. They're going to create a little arch between the back of my head and my scapula. Because now my spine is not being pressed down. It's my scapulas in there. Now I've lost my neck pressure. Now I'm going to slide. Now I'm going to dump the bar out or whatever.
Right.
That feels like crap. And I'm going to have to save it with my biceps and my front delts and pecs and all kinds of fun stuff. And it's not going to feel good. Right? It's going to feel very inefficient. It's going to feel very muscle, right? Imagine someone controlling, you know, I love the cue of being like resistive with the squat, like resisting the bar. And I think that works to a degree if the bar is on midfoot. However, the more that you resist the bar and overemphasize thoracic extension, you actually lock yourself up and actually releasing your hip, right? Releasing the hips or letting the hips move as they should and move through their arc. Right, and their range of motion arc, you're not getting the effective internal rotation and the loading that you're looking for through the hip. So how are you going to save that lift? Spoiler alert, it's probably your back extensors, because that's all you got. You're not using it at that point. Like, and your depth's going to be cut, your center of mass is going to be all kind of funny, and you're going to try to leverage it with a lot of extension tone out of your back. And wouldn't surprise me if you fatigue every other week because, oh, I felt good this week. Oh, wow, now I feel like crap the next week. Well, duh, because your back is doing everything. Like literally everything. There's no push whatsoever. Like, so then you're going to get these weird cycles of fatigue that are inconsistent.
That's a really great point, Brad. Like, because that is, you're having more efficient technique will open up more volume for you because you're able to actually like train like what you want and be, ideally also going to reduce down your injury risk. That's a really great point because if you're not, going through that process of really, you don't need to deload the bar, obviously, but really just take that ego out the equation. And that's why beginners is so important for them to just really establish that techniques. I'm sure you've had this for you several times. Getting like an intermediate lifters and lifting for like 5 years, and they have these lifting with poor technique. It takes a while to unlearn that.
In my coaching experience, it's not that you're trying to like completely break them and move into something else. You're trying to move the needle in the direction they want to get them a little bit more efficient, right? I use Port's deadlift example a lot because we've dropped a couple third attempts at this point now that were huge, or big attempts for us in terms of getting PRs or putting ourselves into placings, things like that. Right, Raw Nationals last year. Arnold this year, although he was pretty much locked out there, but we improved on the lockout aspect of it. And that was literally just a center of mass issue. Like that was just him inching a little bit more forward into his foot to help him feel like he could actually fire the hip through and get the lockout. Right. And if you're having somebody, like I said, in terms of the squat that like locks up their back and like really leverages it through that extensor tone. Well, now you're just trying to find enough like flow state for them to actually let them like move their hips. And I've used it for a couple of people that I tend to find that because you'll actually find a lot of like flexion in their back because they manage gravity up and down. So what they'll do is they'll flex over to feel like they're actually moving up and down. They'll just bend their spine. That's where you see a lot of like elbow tuck, like collapse of the chest and squats. That's them trying to manage the up and down aspect while also internally rotating their hips to be able to load. And I've cued it in a way of like a low box squat, believe it or not. If I get their foot on that midfoot pressure or the ball of big toe pressure, I want to effectively move the bar on path, correct? Right? Assuming that their setup looks fine, they're not overly crunched or anything like that. They feel like they have a pretty normal curvature, they have a brace, all that kind of jazz. We'll check those boxes as assumption. So if I move that bar a little bit more forward with their foot pressure, and I get that shin to change its angle a little bit, when they go to break their knees will find terminal dorsiflexion. Right? Because you're going to get them, you're going to get the pressure on the inside foot. Their knee is going to travel as far as it needs to when they squat. Right? Not initially, but just in general. Okay. Because if you're on your heel, you're not going to get it. You're going to have to then shift your forward. Okay. And that being said, so if I release my hip and I say, hey, maybe I need to go sit to a low box, I can cue that. Well, I can't cue that, right? Because now I've shifted my pressure forward enough to like constrain me, right? So if I need to release my hip and load, right, like a hinge, right? Hinge is a hip loading mechanism. Well, and I know that I'm squatting up and down, then it's fine. If I go to touch a low box, I'm essentially creating the hip loading I need. And I reduce the amount of like them trying to like, do this to squat and actually keep them a little bit more proud. And it might feel like extension to them. It might feel like anterior to them, but the reality of it is it's not.
Yeah.
It's them getting internal rotation, right? Because you can't have a squat with flexion of the low back. You can't have a deadlift lockout with the flexion of the low back or a flat low back. It won't happen. You can save it in certain ways and little tweaks, but more often than not, it's going to be
the moment arm is too long. It's just your body. There's so much force you have to really, especially like a squat. Like it's literally loading the spine directly. Like it's pretty freaking impossible. But that point you made about the low back grounding on like a squat, like kind of like coming forward and like getting like all like crouched over. Like that's like why I like safety bar squats a lot because it teaches that a lot. Like that's like one of the things that I found like really drives like my squat. And I was thinking about why is it? It's like the stacked rib cage position mostly, and like really just having that extensor strength. And that's why like it's a great bridging exercise for me from a technique perspective to my comp squat. That's why I struggle with the most on my comp squats, even though I hate safety bar squat. I don't even likes them. Like it gets me stronger. I'll do them.
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of people do them. I think that they're great because one, they shift that load a little bit more forward enough for somebody that might be a little bit more dominant with extensor tone and position.
Because typically you're going to find that, spinal positions are a little different for each individual, but I tend to find men have a little bit more pronounced lower backs, a lot more extensor strength through the hip, and obviously a hingier type lifting in that regard. So having them to be able to control that with a little bit more reflexive nature of core and obliques and serratus and all that kind of stuff through the SSB tends them to really allow them to get in their hip comfortably without beating them up too much. It's the same effect of like if I'm dealing with somebody's injury, I might put them on like a belt squat just because the axial compression just doesn't feel good. I've got people with like upper back issues that I'm like subbing different things out to help them feel a little bit better. Like, one client that we're trying to get her into nationals, she's been feeling a lot of scap issues. So I went high bar because as her back downs, obviously I need the comp squat going into it, but I need high bars to be back down so that she doesn't feel so beat up in her scaps, with this injury she's dealing with, and be able to get her to the finish line. Obviously, if we had something different going on, I'd probably go SSB or a belt squat to give her some extra lower body volume without beating up her upper back too much. I believe the one question you talked about with like injury management and stuff like that. I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, as many injuries as I've had, I'm quite stubborn with them, and I think that that's a good mindset. And I don't mean that to be like, hey, just go do your normal workout, but be stubborn enough to be able to make modifications and stay in the gym. Like keep doing what you can and do it often, and then have little exposures to the top, to the comp work that injured you often. I full heartedly was listening to some group text messages while I was training the other day, and I like do my bench press, my bar just went left. I don't know why. I was completely mentally out of it because I was thinking of something that somebody had mentioned, and oh dude, it lit up my left pec, like to the point where I couldn't even hold my daughter yesterday. It was that bad. So I just kept doing push-ups. Like I did push-up isometrics. I ended up going back downstairs like an hour later and repping like 70 kilos on bench press. And it was largely because of that shift, that acute shift. And I was like, I'm going to train the crap out of it as long as I can, knowing that it's going to need to recover and all that kind of stuff. So, or was it yesterday? It was 2 days ago. So yesterday I took the day off. Even holding my daughter, I could feel this like tightness and uncomfortableness. Went in today, pretty much hit like 2.5 kilos under my planned number, and it was fine.
That's awesome. Yep, we call that desensitization, folks.
Yeah, and you just like I've been, you keep moving. You just keep moving. I've like buckled myself down here, on my back or onto my knees because of my back, and I'm like, I just got to keep moving. Just got to keep moving. Just keep going, keep going, keep going. And you do what you can, right? If you can't squat, get onto a belt squat, get onto a hack squat, get onto a pendulum, do something. Right? Maybe you are like exposing yourself to partial ROM squats or box squats, pin squats, whatever, tempo, pauses, whatever. Even if it's a load issue, like, hey, I can't take more than 100 kilos. Okay, cool. Work at 70, 80, 90 and let it kind of naturally progress. Right? And then go supplement with something else that you can push harder on. Right? And I mean, obviously, seek out a PT, without being said. But if I can be the first line of defense, I will. Like, and I think those things get you going in the right direction as opposed to somebody that like sits down and does nothing. And I know
I do think coaches have like the first line of defense too with that. It's like it might not always be like our faults, but like like the program plays a role and how they're moving plays a role, and we are partly responsible for that, and so knowing how to manage it is also our responsibility.
Yeah, I mean, injuries are not a bad thing. They're good. They can be helpful for things that need to be addressed, whether that's a programming issue, a movement issue, whatever. They can be helpful in that regard. And sometimes you even learn more coming out of it. I believe Steve posted about that just recently. If I remember correct, or somebody did, where they tweaked the programming and all of a sudden they actually got stronger coming out of the injury.
That was one of my clients, Justin. You're doing 3 times a week benching, and took him down. He got a pec string and took him down 2 times a week with like 7 sets a week, and we've stuck with that approach. He's just been getting stronger.
Yeah, I mean, we sometimes don't need it, and sometimes we do. Like you work off of what's in front of you is ultimately been the theme for our conversation. Is you work off what's in front of you. It's not it's not like you're going to like take, you know, XYZ lifters program and just shove it into someone else's, you know, and expect it to work. Like we are playing the lifter for everything that they bring to the table.
Right.
That's their level of dedication, their psychology, their biomechanics, you know, their training atmosphere, their environment, like, you know, who they're training with, who's going to push them, who's not pushing them. It's like somebody like, I mean, to me, if you ask me to max out of my basement, I'd tell you to go to hell because I don't want to max out of my basement. I don't like it. I'm not going to perform well here. But if you ask me to go to the gym and do it, absolutely, I love that. Sure. So being able to like really paint the picture for the individual is, as a coach, it takes time, it takes dedication on both fronts. I'm not going to come to the table and act like I'm going to be your savior and you're not going to bring anything to it. I'm just not. You're not going to communicate very well. You're not going to give me feedback. You're not going to fill out your sheet. How am I supposed, how do you expect me to be, you know, not to toot my own horn, but you know, one of the good coaches, if you're not going to come to the table with me.
Right.
And like, you need to have the accountability. You need to bring it all of it. You know,
great points all around. So Brett, I really want to thank you for coming on. This is an absolute pleasure. And we'll definitely have to get you on again. Like we went through like maybe like 3 of the things you wanted to talk about.
I could go
like that's just oh wow, I can do. I'm naturally very extroverted.
Yeah.
But you know, if you want to maybe follow you, hire you, where should they go?
What's that?
If you want to like follow you or hire you or just say what's up,
well, right now I'm on a hiatus for taking people on because of nationals and all that kind of stuff. I'll probably do like an application process at the end. Obviously follow on Instagram. I don't really use YouTube. You get those as Steve calls it, my rage posts, where I just get fired up about something and just, you know, do it on a purely emotional whim. Or Steve coaxes me and makes me, you know, do a video for Powerlifting Now. I'll do some stuff, but yeah, that would be the best avenue.
After nationals, after September, freaking after after this week of the 10th of September, say what's up to Brad. Hire him for coaching. He'll get you strong and really knows his stuff. You know, tons of great athletes he's worked with over the years, and there's a reason why he is the coach's coach. So we'll leave it on that, Brad. Thank you so much for coming on, and thank you everybody for listening.
Thanks, man.